So I am here with Dr. Rudolph Alexander Jr., who is the author of the book, The Myth of Affirmative Action. He's a Black professor who published a book refuting the U.S. Supreme Court on affirmative action. How are you doing today, Dr. Alexander?
Fine.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you. So in your recently published book, The Myth of Affirmative Action, which was published by Ethics International Press, you say white society has long scapegoated Blacks for social conditions. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I initially said that uh, there's a correlation between the price of cotton and the lynching of Black people. As cotton prices go down, lynching goes up. That's what sociologists said. I think in an article that they published about 15 to 20 years ago, they looked at over time the price of cotton and looked at the number of lynchings, and they found a correlation between those two variables.
That makes a lot of sense because you see a lot of rise of like the alt-right. And like, I feel like, the kind of the narrative that you get, like, if you listen to like some of these like people is like, now whites feel if they don't get into college or they get a job, it's because Blacks receive affirmative action and racial preference over more qualified whites in education and employment. Will you say that's the case?
Yes, that's definitely the case. I was reading something last night about some whites saying that Blacks have it good and they're getting good jobs and they squeezing out white folks. And there's not people saying the opposite. And they saying that it's true. But we don't have any data that says that it's true. They just think it in their mind and they just say it and people believe it.
Yeah, because in your book you point out like that this is pretty much false, and you use like the example of like the University of Wisconsin, where like one year they admitted 27 Black students with ACT scores between 16 and 19, which many whites would consider low and an example of a affirmative action. However, the same year the University of Wisconsin admitted 429 white students with scores between 16 and 19. So the University of Wisconsin also admitted 5 white students with scores below 15, admitted 1 white student with a score of 13.
That's correct. That's Jennifer Brand's study. She calls that affirmative action for whites.
Yes, that's really interesting and stuff. Like, why though? Like, is that like not more detailed? Because like, I mean, it feels like, that like, they're admitting like, whites that fall well below like, the parameters to get admission into the school, but like nobody's upset about that.
That's because seldom those numbers and statistics are seldom revealed. So that's why people don't talk about it as much. I said the same thing about 20 years ago. And some people said that was true, but they don't talk about it.
A white law professor who wrote that he had adopted a Black son and therefore couldn't be racist argued that Black students should not go to elite law schools because their median score was lower than whites on the LSAT. That's the law school admissions test. So the law professor compared over 1,800 white students to about 140 Black students. The median score is where the middle of distribution of scores lies, which means that about 900 whites were below the median for their group and 70 Black students were below the median for their group.
That's correct. I very much wanted to see the professor's data. And I emailed him and requested the data. And one professor can request another professor's data when they're doing research. And so I never got a response from this white professor because I think it was going to show what the University of Wisconsin data showed about the 426 white students that got in and 27 Black students got in.
That's interesting. Donald Trump, he said, similar remarks. Like if he was Black, that he would receive preference for a job over whites.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about comments like that?
That's asinine. Donald Trump has never gotten a job in his life. He was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He came from a rich family, and his father got him started. So he never had to go out and look for a job. But because he was president, people believe him because he's in the position of authority. And one thing we hear that when people say something in authority, the public tends to believe it.
100%. And there's statistics and stuff that back up that Blacks have always been had the highest unemployment rates. Like why is that specifically?
I think it's because of history. And Blacks, when they came out of slavery, they couldn't get well-paying jobs. And they were always shining shoes, porters, cooks, and these are jobs that don't pay well, and it just was viewed as a Black person job. So shining shoes was a Black person job. Picking up garbage was a Black person job. And if they didn't get those jobs, they would have nothing. So it's always been low. I think I mentioned in my book, I went to a predominantly Black college, well, a predominantly Black elementary school. And one of my teachers had a part-time job. And his job was waiting on tables in a restaurant. I was washing dishes in the kitchen. This was back in the 1960s. But that's probably the only job he could get was bussing tables for tips as a part-time job.
Wow, what can be done to correct these issues in the country? Because I feel like it's still hard for Black people to get a job, especially if they have a criminal record or various other issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, society has to change, and it seems like we're going backwards. We're going ahead first, and through struggles, we attain a little bit of advancement. But since Ron DeSantis and all these people related to him are taking us back. And we have lost ground. But we have to keep on trying.
What are your thoughts about the U.S. Supreme Court? Like, they believe, like, if you score on tests high, like, you should get admission to the school. Like, what are your thoughts about that?
That is not the case. That is a device to favor whites, because when a Black person says that they lost out on a job because employers have favored whites and they were more qualified than whites, they have lost their lawsuits. And the Supreme Court has stated, and federal courts have stated, that a person that has more education, more experience, and more job potential is not more qualified. And an employer does not have to hire the most qualified. If you take that analogy and apply it to education, a white student that has 2/10 of more a higher score than a Black person should not be more meritorious, and they're not more qualified.
That's interesting and stuff, because it brings up the issue of Harvard, which admitted a record number of Asian American students this year, but the number of Black and Latino admissions dropped.
Well, yes, it drops, and it's dropping ever since the Supreme Court has ruled on affirmative action cases in the past 10 years. And it's been going down. The enrollment is going down. And some people would like that because they think that if more minorities are not getting into colleges, that means that more whites are in colleges.
Definitely. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Alexander. I really appreciate you.
I really appreciate you inviting me to your show, and I would like to come back in the future.
Definitely. I'd love to have you back.
Okay.
Definitely.